So I think I have to be honest with myself that I've been putting off filming this video. I really don't have a lot to say, and what I do have to say is either going to be really vague or not very positive, just because the subject matter that we're dealing with. This was a January release. And a lot of the time, that tends to be the horror movie graveyard. Movies that come out in January just kind of don't stun typically. And as soon as teasers and the trailers started dropping for this one, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be what I had wanted it to be. I was still holding out hope up until maybe like a week before this came out, but then I just saw lots of negative reviews dropping, and I still went to go see it, holding out hope. I have a very specific relationship with the first Silent Hill movie that I'll talk about a little bit more in spoilers. So I was holding out hope that maybe this would work for me. And unfortunately, it did not. So of course, we will be talking about Return to Silent Hill. This was directed by Christoph Gans. It stars Jeremy Irving and Hannah Emily Anderson. When a man receives a mysterious letter from his lost love, he is drawn to Silent Hill, a once familiar town now consumed by darkness. And so this movie was not intended to be a continuation of the first two movies in this franchise. It was meant to be based off of Silent Hill 2, the video game. And just for your own personal context around my review, I have not played any of the Silent Hill video games. I am a huge fan of the first movie, and up until last week, I had not seen Silent Hill Revelation. So that's the kind of framework that I am coming from personally. And so this movie follows the main character, James, as he returns to Silent Hill, so to speak, to find his long-lost girlfriend. And that's kind of all the information that we, as the viewer who, taking out all of the other subject matter, that is where we go into this movie. As far as the themes of this movie, I think what it's trying to convey is something about grief and loss and love and the lengths that we go to for the ones we love kind of stuff. The reason I roll my eyes to that, whereas I probably wouldn't in another movie, is that it feels very shallow in the way that it's depicted. I think there's also something going on about like second chances potentially, and I'll talk more about that in spoilers. But generally, this is a story about someone losing the person they love and going to sort of extremes to connect with them again in some way. And in talking about the execution, this is the portion where I will probably be most unkind, and I apologize in advance. This movie is a mess. It is a mess from start to finish. I can't even really speak to the skill of the acting in this movie because the dialogue is so cheesy and cliche and just hard to listen to that I couldn't even tell you if they were doing a good job because they're working with very little. I've never seen Jeremy Irving in anything. I have seen Emily Hannah Anderson. Hannah Emily Anderson? Hannah Emily Anderson. Yeesh. I have seen her in a few roles. She tends to kind of end up in these sort of cheesy roles. The only other thing I can think of seeing her in was Jigsaw, where she plays like a Jigsaw groupie, and everything that she's required to say as part of her role is just really hard to listen to. So I don't know if it's her or if it's just she's been like typecast in these really cringeworthy roles, unfortunately. But what I really thought I was going to dislike about this movie was the CGI, and honestly, it was maybe the best part of the movie. And all in all, it really didn't look that bad. And with a setting like Silent Hill, you really can't get away with too many practical effects just because it's supposed to be a very specific looking environment with very specific looking villains. You can, and I don't mean to villainize CGI in these videos by any means. I think it can be done well. I don't know if I would say this was done well, but it wasn't done as bad as I was anticipating. Like, some of the things looked pretty cool in isolation. So yeah, the CGI wasn't the worst part. The worst part was probably the plotting. This movie bounced around all over the place. It was in a flashback, then it was in the present, then it was a dream, then it was another flashback. I mean, we were just everywhere. We were everywhere with it. And I think going in not having played the game, it it does not explain itself well. So I took my younger sister to see this movie with me, and the only lore that I have is from talking about the game with my husband, so I knew a little bit more than she did going in, but both of us were just immensely confused. Everything in this movie is so jarring, like every moment is so jarring that none of it feels like it flows. It really does feel like just extended cut of a bunch of different like cutscenes in a video game. And I know that it's based on a video game, but I feel like you could make it feel like a movie without it feeling so painfully awkward. Another just small gripe that I have is the whole movie is based around this love story, supposedly, and I don't buy it for a second. There is very little chemistry. There is zero chemistry, let's just be real. There is zero chemistry between the two leads. I don't feel it. I don't have any feelings about it. I don't know. Everything in the way it was written was just either cringe or boring or forgetful, and that is really unfortunate. I'm gonna have to be kind of cruel in this section as well. With how much you are working with in terms of like, just from my understanding of the game, there is a lot of really frightening, really grotesque and gross stuff that you can work with. You know, you have this budget, you have all this source material. How was this movie so boring? The scares were boring and just sort of choppy and thrown in there again, just like video game cutscenes. Like none of it felt like it flowed with what was going on. There was one very loud jump scare that did get me, but that's cheap, you know? Everything else outside of that was just kind of like, here is an image that you are meant to look at, and I was looking at it. It was just bland, and I just don't feel like there was any passion to any of it. So this will probably be the quickest spoiler-free portion of any of my videos. There's not too much to talk about, unfortunately. If you are a fan of the game, I've heard that this is a little bit more fun just for the nostalgia element. If you are not a fan of the game, maybe read a Wikipedia page before you watch this so you might get a better understanding of what the hell is going on. I really don't know if I, in good conscience, can tell anyone to see this in theaters. If you have a curiosity, maybe wait until streaming. That feels so mean, but I don't know. I was really disappointed, and I've heard a lot of other people have been as well. So we'll talk spoilers next. Let me know what you thought. If you enjoyed this, I am glad for you. If you were as frustrated and upset as I was, I would love to hear that down in the comments. So I've been making content for about a year now talking about horror movies. Every once in a while, I will kind of bring up my top 5, right? My favorite horror movies. And the first Silent Hill movie is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, mostly because it's one of the first movies that I ever saw in theaters. I was like 10, I think. It was so scary to me, and I loved that feeling. And so this might date me, but I rented it from the from the Blockbuster or whatever it was several times, and at one point I held on for it too long and the Blockbuster in my hometown actually closed down, and so I ended up owning it. And so I must have watched this movie maybe like 50 plus times. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this movie. I watched it so much that I got tired of watching it, and then I watched all of the behind the scenes. So I know a stupid amount of lore about this movie, and it really was like my introduction to a certain kind of horror, and it was my introduction into like behind the scenes stuff. And so if you don't already know, a lot of the first Silent Hill movie was done practically. A lot of the monsters in the movie are people in costumes, like enhanced with CGI. I feel like the first movie just has a lot of love put into it. It feels cohesive. It has a very particular mood. And like some of the dialogue, yes, is cringe. I know that. I can reflect on that now as an adult. But I think that it sets a tone and it sets a mood so that you're immersed in it, so that this kind of like choppy, awkward video game cutscene dialogue doesn't feel quite as jarring as it does in Return to Silent Hill, because I don't feel like the mood is properly set. So that being said, When I heard that we were getting Return to Silent Hill and Christoph Gans was going to be directing it, I was excited and I was hoping that we would get something with a similar vibe to the first one. Another thing I really loved about the first movie was the soundtrack. So on top of having the same director, it was also supposed to have the same soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka. These things felt really promising to me. Just hearing the news, I was really excited about it. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I had seen some trailers, and so like my hopes kind of dwindled lower and lower as time went on. So I'll talk a little bit about the movie, but honestly, if I'm being brutally honest, it is very forgettable. And as soon as I left the theater, the little that I was clinging to just kind of dissipated. So essentially we follow James as it starts off as this little meet cute with him and his girlfriend. And then we abruptly cut to him being sad and dramatic about something, but we don't know what. Then he gets this letter, he goes to Silent Hill, and as soon as he gets to Silent Hill, we are just thrusted into this universe. Immediately we are in video game cutscene dialogue. It just feels so jarring, and I can't take it seriously the way that people talk in this movie. It's just cringe. It's hard to sit through. So he essentially goes through this journey. You get things that you have just like classic Silent Hill things, like the air raid siren goes off, everything gets like dark and gross, then the creatures come out. Although in this one they're kind of out all the time anyway. I don't know if that's like the game or what, but I remember distinctly, at least I believe I remember distinctly, that in the first movie they don't come out until the sirens go off because it's supposed to be safer. I don't know. Anyway, so you get your little gross goblins, acid spitting guys. You get Pyramid Head, who a lot of people were griping that he's not as hot as they wanted him to be. Which I get, he doesn't have the same like physique as he does in, you know, other things that I've seen him in. I mean, as a different man. All of the extra characters are just unbearable. There's a dude, a guy who just happens to be there, unbearable. There's a little girl carrying around like a fetus. And I know that, again, I know that there's cheesy dialogue and kid acting in the first Silent Hill movie, but with nothing else going for it, it is, again, just unbearable in this movie. James runs around, does a lot of stuff, runs into a bunch of different iterations of his girlfriend. Again, just like the wardrobe on these characters is just so abrupt that it takes you out of the moment. It's just so cheesy, and it really just doesn't work. The whole thing just feels so bland and heartless and soulless. Like nobody gave a shit. That's how I felt watching this. Like nobody gave a shit about any of this. You get a scene where he wakes up in like a regular hospital. It's sort of alluding to the fact that this is all happening in his head in some sort of like grief psychosis, but then he plunges back into Silent Hill and then ends up in some sort of time loop by killing himself within Silent Hill and wakes up back at the beginning of the movie and is able to like correct the whole thing. It kind of undercuts the whole like grief and loss of it all, right? Like if you could just get a do-over. The ending feels as shallow as the rest of the movie does. Unfortunately, I really don't know if I have much else to say at this point. I gave this movie a 1 out of 5 stars, which is almost my lowest rating, my lowest being like a 0.5. And that's more for movies that I just like vehemently hate. And I don't hate this movie. I'm disappointed with this movie, which feels like more harsh. It's just, there's just nothing really to it. There's nothing that held me in place, nothing that I cared about after I left. And it just feels, like I said, just like heartless. It feels soulless. I don't feel like any passion or creativity or care really went into making this. That could just be my perspective. Maybe if you play the video games, this felt a little bit better. From what I've heard about the video games and how much people like them, I would hope that this isn't what they feel like. Like, I hope that they feel a little bit more purposeful. This movie just doesn't have that. And just a side note, I did a dumb thing, and when I went home, I was convinced by the person that I took to see this movie to watch Silent Hill Revelation. and I purposely didn't watch that movie because I knew that it was bad, and I watched it and I hated it. I will talk about that in my sort of January wrap-up video, but that was terrible, and that's probably where I'll put it, as like a half star. So as far as I'm concerned, there is one Silent Hill movie and that's it. I will continue to talk about that movie and hold it near and dear in my heart. Well, that's it for that one. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave me a comment and tell me what you thought about Return to Silent Hill. I also do short form content on TikTok and Instagram, so you can follow me there. But until next time, and hopefully the next one I watch, I'll have some better things to say about. But thanks for sticking around.